Hi, I'm Johnny from UltimatePaperMache.com, and today I want to talk to you about why I think it's so important to put a pattern on the inside of an animal sculpture. And I want to talk about the flat kind of patterns that go on the inside of a sculpture, not these three-dimensional ones like I have back here. These patterns actually create all of the forms for you. And they're really good for people who are in a hurry. They don't really have time to start from scratch and create an original sculpture. Or maybe they don't quite yet have the confidence to create an animal's face from scratch. That's what these patterns are for. But I don't want to talk about those kind of patterns in this video. I want to talk about the ones that showed up originally in my book, How to Make Animal Sculptures with Paper Mache Clay. My pig was one of those projects, and ever since I wrote that book, he's been on my logo at the top of my website. I think he's really cool. My cat knocked him off the shelf, and I had to fix his ear. I haven't painted it yet, but I still think he's pretty nice. And this pig does have a pattern on the inside. Let me show you what it looks like. It's exactly the same as the outline of the pig. So once you start out with this pattern that shows all the outlines, and you pad that cardboard pattern from the side, but you never cover up the edges. And so you know from the beginning, if you start with a pattern, you know that your animal is going to look exactly the way you expected it to look when you started. Now, to be honest, when I first started this blog 10 years ago, I wasn't using patterns. In fact, I didn't know anybody else who was using patterns either. My very first blog post was a dragon, and he turned out really cute eventually. But I made him exactly the same way that I made my paper mache sculptures when I was back in grade school. I started crumpling up paper, wrapping it up with masking tape, filling out the form a little bit at a time, like you would if you were sculpting with clay. Put the legs on there. When I had most of the shapes on there, I would look at it and see if the proportions were right. And of course, they weren't, and so I'd have to take it apart and do it over. And that's kind of the way I did quite a few of the projects on this website before I started getting really frustrated with how long it was taking. I'm not a person like Michelangelo, for instance, who could get all the proportions right the very first time I do it. I just don't have that kind of brain. I don't know exactly how that sculpture is going to look until all the pieces are on it. Then I can look at it and say, yeah, that has to change. That leg isn't in the right place, or those legs are too long or too short, or the head is too big, or the body is too long, or there would always be something that needed to be changed, and I had to keep making them over again. You do eventually come up with something that's really cool, like my dragon. I really like him. But it took a long time to get to that point. It was just really frustrating for me. I started reading every book I could find in the library. If I couldn't find them in the library, I went out to Amazon.com and ordered a used version of every book I could find. I've got a huge library now of paper mache books, and I think I have read every single one of them. If it has paper mache in it, I've read it. And I was really specific. I had a very specific goal in mind. I wanted to know for sure, before I ever started, that my animal sculpture was going to end up the way I wanted it to. I kept looking for solutions to it, and I just couldn't find one. And then I found this one. I got this out on Amazon.com. It's called 3D Wizardry, and I'm going to put a link to it down below because it's a really cool book. It does have ideas from a lot of different artists, so it tends to be just a little bit disorganized, kind of jumps around from one idea to the next. A lot of different kinds of sculptures, paper mache, plaster, and foam. So, you know, you kind of have to pick and choose. But one of the ideas in this book is the one that I really needed, and that is, of course, the idea of using a pattern on the inside of a sculpture. I had never seen it anywhere before. And as soon as I read that, I knew that I had found the solution to the problem. It's a whole lot easier to correct the proportions and everything on a piece of paper than it is after you've got all the crumpled paper or foil and masking tape and everything put together for an armature, and then you figure out the proportions are wrong and have to fix it. It's so much easier to get it right from the start. But I also started figuring out that the fact that it makes it easy isn't the only really important reason why patterns are so helpful in a sculpture. And that is that, I mean, it's kind of an intuitive thing. I guess I should have known right from the start, but it didn't occur to me. But human brains are wired to recognize the outlines of an animal. If you don't believe me, look at these images that I'm going to show you here. I'm going to just flip through a few basic outlines of animals, and I want you to guess which one of them is a kangaroo. Ready? Let's get started. Okay, that was fast, but did you figure out which one it was? Of course you did. You didn't have to guess. You just knew which one was which. Now, why is that so easy to do? Because human beings have been living with animals for a very, very long time. As a matter of fact, most of the time that humans have been on Earth, we've been really close to animals. And it was really important to tell the difference between one kind and another. Some of them are dangerous and some of them aren't. You need to know. And even now, if you happen to go for a hike out in the woods, if you see an animal in the distance, you better know for sure, is that a deer or is it a mountain lion? Because if you can't tell the difference, you're going to be in really big trouble. One of them, it's okay. You just keep making noise and they're going to run away. The other one, you better be really quiet and start backing up, right? That's part of our survival system. So if you see an animal that has a very specific outline and you get the animal right because you've made a sculpture based on that outline, then everyone who sees it is going to recognize what it is, without question. So you'll know from the very beginning that you have a recognizable, successful sculpture. On this particular sculpture, all of the shapes that I added to the sides of the pattern were very, very simplified. And that's just fine. As long as the legs are the right distance apart and you have the outline right, you've got a successful sculpture and you know from the very beginning that it's going to be successful. Once I discovered this, I kind of made it my mission to start teaching this process and letting people know how much easier it is to make a sculpture using a pattern. Now, I want to emphasize that you do not have to use one of the patterns that I've created or that's been created by someone else. You can make your own. And just to show you that that's true, I want you to go see Chris Kelly's guest post. She did use the pattern that's in my book to make herself a pig, but she made him life-size. Because if you have a pattern, you can make it as big or small as you want to. You don't have to make one this size. You can make a life-size one like she did. Well, then she moved into a new house that has a really tall ceiling in the living room. And so she's thinking, I've got to have a life-size giraffe to fill up that space. I've never made a pattern for a giraffe. There's certainly not one in my book on how to make animal sculptures, but she just went ahead and made one. So she started from scratch, but she knew from the beginning exactly how it was going to look, and she had the confidence to make something really, really big because it had a pattern on the inside. If you're interested in learning more about how to use patterns on the inside of a paper mache animal sculpture, there are several ways you can do it. Of course, you can get my book, Make Animal Sculptures with Paper Mache Clay, kind of a shameless promotion there. I will put a link to it down below. But if you don't have time for a whole book, you can find my premium patterns up on the pattern page. Just click on the link up at the top of the blog. Now that's going to include both the flat patterns like I've been talking about in this video and the three-dimensional wall sculptures in mask like the one you see back here. So they're all together on that one page. But if you still don't find what you need, go ahead and hit the Art Library button at the top of the blog, and that's going to lead you to over 400 different projects. So go get started, make something, and then come on back to the Daily Sculptors page and show it off. We would love to see how it turns out. I'll see you there.